Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome, everyone. Hi. It's so great to see you. I am so happy that you're here, and I'm going to start my slides here in just 1 second. There we go. Welcome to Doing the Impossible, an introduction to practical magic for entrepreneurs. And I'm waiting for people to arrive, and I'm seeing that several people are actually showing up right now. So we'll just hang out for a couple minutes and notice that people are just beginning to show up. I'm making sure that everybody can hear me. Here we go. Welcome to Doing the Impossible. All right. So I want to just let you know how you can tell that you're in the right place, right? Because this is an odd title, right? An introduction to practical magic for entrepreneurs. So I want to let you know that we're all about practical here. That's the watchword. It is about being practical. And I want to make sure that you can actually see the slides on my screen. So if you can see the slides on my screen, then just give me a message in the chat and let me know. Let me know that you can see the slides on my screen. All right. Okay, so here's how to tell if you're in the right place. If you seem to have everything, or you've got a lot of what you need, and you're still not happy. And this happens to a lot of folks. They looks like what happens when I share my screen is that when I share my screen, it looks like, or when I do my slide presentation, it looks like it pops off my screen. So I'm just gonna zoom these up. Oh, maybe not that much. Something like that. Okay, and you just get to see my wires a little bit. And we'll see if that pops on in a little bit. But you don't have to see the screen for right now. You just need to listen to my voice. So here is how to tell you're in the right place. If you seem to have everything, but you're not really happy. If you can't seem to get past whatever's keeping you at the level that you're at, like some of us are trying to pop to the next level in a kind of quantum way, and we can't seem to do that, right? The other thing is that someone or something seems to be holding the keys to our success. And this is an odd feeling. It happens to me, and I'll tell you a story in just a second about how this used to be for me, where it's like, okay, somebody else is actually just turning the dials. It's like, wait a minute, how did this happen? My life didn't seem to be mine. Or life seems dull even though you're doing the right things, and this is a kind of doldrums that can come over you, which aren't even like a depression. It's just like, life seems kind of lackluster, even though you're doing the right thing. And it's not on the slide here, but I just want to say that the other thing is that that there's something missing in your life. You don't know what it is, but there's just something that seems to be missing. And of course, I like to say that there's also another thing, which is if you also want magic, right? You want magic to happen in your life. You want, instead of this feeling of everything not going well or not being able to get past something, that you just want a little bit of magic to happen in your life, right? Let's get you back in your power. Like, that's what my commitment is just to get you back in your power, right? Like, I know you want some magic, right? So I can't, of course, tell you everything that I know about magic in an hour. That would take like several years. Fortunately, I've got a program that takes several years that you can learn that from, but I'm not talking about that right now. I'm going to tell you a little story of my own wizardry, and I'm going to tell you a little thing that actually used to happen to me, is that my life just felt like it was this scene in the this scene in the Through the Looking Glass, because this scene is really about Alice shows up in, you know, the land of the Looking Glass. She meets the Red Queen, and they're running as fast as they possibly can. You know, they're powering, running, just almost flying, and they're not going anywhere. They're staying in the same place, right? and what's happening is that since they're staying in the same place and running as fast as they can, Alice says, well, we're running just as fast as we can to stay in the same place. And the Red Queen says, yes, that's how it is around here. And I had actually made up the second part of the story, which was that the Red Queen then said, if you want to go over there, we have to go in the opposite direction. Now, how funny is that I made that up? But I actually really believe it. Sometimes if you want to go someplace, you have to go in the opposite direction. That's another wizard skill that I might talk about a little bit later. So I want to tell you a story of recent wizardry that, you know, these kind of go. All right. So can you hear me now? All right. We're going to go back to those slides. I don't know why suddenly I was muted for no reason at all. So apologies for that. Thank you so much for my assistant, who's able to tell me these things and was able to tell me that my microphone was off. Thank you, Gifford Espesso, who is just an amazing person who helps me out with these. So I want to make sure that I'm still being able to be heard. Yes, Gifford reports that I can now be heard. So I don't know what you missed, but it was a great story. I'm going to continue, though, by saying that a week before this event, I had no ticket, and tickets were at a very high price at that point. There were no discount tickets left. And not only was I attending the event for free, but I was actually participating in one of the presentations. So because of the skill set that I brought to the table. So now you might think, well, that was just a series of lucky coincidences. And you might be right. But I choose to think that it is acts of wizardry. And by understanding how the invisible world works, you can begin to manipulate it in order to get what you want, right? So I'm going to talk about 3 different aspects of navigating the invisible world, because this is really an introduction to practical magic for entrepreneurs. And so I'm going to be real practical with you, right? And the first practical thing I'm going to say is that, look, the invisible world is invisible, right? We can't see it. So how do we navigate in it? And how do we actually know that it's there? So I'm going to give you some education about that. And by the end of it, I think you'll agree with me that there's an invisible world. So I'm going to move through a couple of these slides, and I want you to just get that there is a world that is beyond the mundane. The most important thing that you need to know about running a business is not about your business at all. And it's not even about your inner game. Because a lot of people go, okay, well, I've got my business education and I've got my inner game, I got my game on. And, well, gosh darn it, that's all I need. Well, I postulate that you actually need something else, that you need a relationship with the invisible world. And the thing is that I'm not making this up whole cloth, right? I'm not making it up out of nothing. I am actually following maps of the invisible world that have existed sometimes for thousands of years. And they've existed for thousands of years in very obscure forms. And I've taken them out, dusted them off, and gone, okay, let's actually figure out what is working here. So the first concept that I want to introduce you to is correspondences. Now, correspondences are essentially roadmaps in our world that correspond to things in the invisible world. And there are a lot of clues in our world. Navigating the invisible world is kind of like the story of the 5 blind men and the elephant. So, there are 5 blind men and an elephant, and each one of them is on a different part of the elephant. And one of them is like, oh, no, this is a beautiful, warm fan. It's a big fan shape. And of course, that one was on the ear. And another one's like, no, it's this tubular thing that has this amazing qualities and is able to grasp things and move around. And that, of course, that one was on the trunk. And then another one says, no, you are so all wrong. What we're dealing with here is an actual big, crinkly mass, like just as far as the hands can reach and the eye can see, this solid plane. And of course, that one was on the side of the elephant, et cetera, right? And so you can see that mapping the invisible world is kind of like that. But if you get enough blind men around the elephant and they all compare notes, then you can begin to build a map for those men of the elephant, just like we can begin to build a map of the invisible world. And I'll give you some examples of how that is. In the ancient world, the human body was an example of a map of the invisible world. The way that our circulatory system is put together and the way that our body is proportioned. In fact, the sacred proportion, or the golden mean, is based on a ratio of 1.618, right? The golden mean. And this is the thing that is actually responsible for things like fractals. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself because I want to give you a couple of very quick definitions, right? Most people think of magic as this thing called legerdemain. And legerdemain is what is kind of known as sleight of hand magic or sleight of hand magic. And that kind of magic is magic in which you fool someone, right? And this is not about fooling you. This is about actually empowering you, right? Arthur C. Clarke had these three laws, and the third one has to do with magic. And here's Clarke's third law. He says, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So I always like to play with language. And so the first thing I did was just reverse what was on the other side of the is, right? You know, magic is indistinguishable from any sufficiently advanced technology, right? That's essentially what the statement says. It's just backwards, right? And so then, it's like, well, if something's indistinguishable from something else, right? If there is really no way to distinguish it from something else, then it is the same thing. So Clarke's third law essentially says that magic is advanced technology. Magic is advanced technology. So let me define for you the two terms that I'll be using for the rest of this webinar. The first one is magic, right? And of course, there's 1,000 definitions of magic. For the purposes of our work today, we're going to say that magic is a set of tools and techniques that wizards can use to influence probability in the direction of what they desire. So, and this is a PS, that's really the definition. The PS is when wizards do this effectively, it can seem like they're doing the impossible. Now, remember I said doing the impossible is the definition of what we're talking about here. You're really not doing the impossible, but people have such a limited view of what's possible that when you actually go to the edges of the boundaries of the universal laws that we all have to abide by, it can seem like you're doing the impossible. Isn't that amazing? Okay, let's define wizard. So a wizard is a person of either gender. And I know there's this sort of gender bias about witches and wizards, but I just think wizards are of either gender. You know, you can be a male wizard or a female wizard or any gender in between. It's a person of any gender who is living their life the way life was designed to be lived, and with a balanced feeling of power, and with the knowledge and skills to do things others might think are impossible, right? So now I didn't just say a wizard has the skills to do things others might think impossible. These first two clauses are really important. I want you to get that part of the addressing of those things that we talked about at the beginning, that we're like, okay, what's up here that we are unable to live our life fully. You're not living your life the way it was designed to be lived. And your power is not steady, right? Sometimes we feel super powerful. Sometimes we feel like, oh, you know. And of course, that's always going to be the case because you're embodied in a human body and all of that, right? It's just the way it is. But I want you to know that with advanced wizardry comes a more balanced feeling of power, so that you feel more in power more of the time without having any kinds of ups and downs. So here's where we have to say that you can't map it directly. It's called the invisible world for a reason. It can't be mapped. So one of the things that is a principle of magic and of the invisible world is as above, so below. And what that means is there are groups that study just this phrase for a year, right? What does as above, so below mean? But we're actually going to be very simple about this, right? We're going to say that as above, so below means that the invisible world can be mapped by things in the visible world. The above can be mapped by the below. Now, one of my hobbies is searching in scientific literature for things that echo what metaphysical science has been saying for generations. So my opinion is that metaphysics comes up with it first, and then science sort of lags along a little bit later, right? Now, what this means is that fractals, like let's hear the definition of fractals: a curved or geometric figure, each part of which has the same statistical character as the whole. Fractals are useful in modeling structures such as eroded coastlines or snowflakes, right? At which, you know, these are things in which similar patterns recur at progressively smaller and smaller scales. And they, as the definition in Wikipedia says, in describing partly random or chaotic phenomena such as crystal growth, fluid turbulence, and galaxy formation. So notice that everything that's listed here is like, in parentheses, life, right? So life follows this formula of the same at progressively smaller and smaller, or if you're small, larger and larger scales, right? As above, so below is a fractal statement. So now we can talk a little bit about correspondences. Correspondences are maps, right? And we can say that the body is a map. Like we said, we can say that the sacred proportion is a map. There's a book written in the early part of the 20th century called Man, the Great Symbol of the Mysteries, which of course was sort of that misogynistic time where, you know, it always had to be man. But like, let's just say the human being is the great symbol of the mysteries. Now, there is a powerful set of archetypes and correspondences that exist for us today, and they can be studied. And these archetypes are found in the tarot, and you might recognize this figure from the tarot. Some, depending on where you are in the world, it's sometimes called tarot or tarot. Came from an Italian game called Tarocchi Appropriati. But through the years, it has come to be embedded and imbued with archetypal energy. And it is said, and I believe it is said by Italo Calvino, but I'm not exactly sure of the attribution, but the quote still stands. If you were imprisoned or stranded on a desert island with only a pack of tarot cards for company, then you would over time learn to navigate your way through and master all aspects of life, the answers of which are encoded in the symbols of the tarot. Isn't that amazing, right? You just need a deck of cards, right? So how do the cards get used to map the invisible world? Now, some of you probably came to this call or came to the recording of this webinar through the Soul Strengths readings, and I'm not going to belabor them for those who did not. But I want to say that that if you are in witness of a tarot card, then the first thing that you want to do is take a look at what's actually happening, right? In this card, you've got a man hanging upside down by 1 foot. His hair is kind of splayed out. His head is below the ground. There are a number of cut ends on the trees that are supporting the gibbet that he's hung from. He's got a multicolored jacket on. Each element in the card is a symbol that can be looked at. And each archetype can be noticed. So what you do is you go, just what I did. What are they wearing? What are they holding? Who else is there? What's in the environment? All of the questions that have to do with that. Now I want to show you, I'm going to go through fractals here, and I want to show you, this is one of the cards from the deck that I've just finished creating, 78 cards of the tarot. And this is one of the cards called Strength. And if you don't know anything about the tarot, strength is from the major arcana, which are the very powerful archetypes. And the number cards, which kind of relate to the number cards in the suite of like playing cards that we still use today, are principles for living. So they're powerful archetypes and principles. And so we notice, you know, there's a lion, there's a sort of infinity symbol in the air. There is a bunch of flowers that are surrounding the lion and the woman. She's got her hand in his mouth and seems relatively unconcerned that a giant roaring lion with his mouth wide open is sitting next to her, right? So these are all symbols. And of course, the color of the ground, the fact that the sun is setting, the fact that the lion is red, all of these things have some meaning. And we learn through things like the School for Wizards what those mean, but we also learn how to assign our own meanings to these cards. Like you begin to allow all of the symbols in the card to resonate with you, right? So there's a point that I'm coming to here, right? So you pull up another card also from the deck that I created, the Two of Wands, and you notice how these characters interact. You know, there's a character that's facing away from his body's facing away from us, his face is facing toward us. What does that mean? He's carrying the crook and the flail, Egyptian symbols for authority. He's inside of an archway, a columned archway. So what does all that mean, right? I just want you to notice that there is now a new card up here, and there's a way that these cards now relate to each other. And if you said to yourself in your life, okay, I'm going to have this card on the left be what's happening in the present, and I'm going to have the card on the right be what could potentially happen in the future, or be information for me about what I might want to do in the future. So you see it's beginning to get richer and richer. And truthfully, the tarot cards are signposts into your unconscious. Signposts into your unconscious. And even Carl Jung said that there is a collective unconscious, right? There's a place that is shared by all of us. Like, what a concept, right? Even one of the great fathers of psychotherapy and psychology says that there's a world out there that we share that doesn't belong to any of us, right? He's essentially verifying the invisible world, right? And what these cards do is activate the sections of that collective unconscious, right? Sometimes if we're in the presence of the tarot or presence of powerful correspondence, you know, sometimes they're images, symbols, or pictures. Sometimes they're stories, like if you get told a story and suddenly you find yourself physiologically flushing sensations moving through the body, having a sudden flash, like a quantum flash of insight, you know, and then suddenly as a result of that, you're seeing colors brighter, you're seeing cleaner edges, you know. Some people actually hear things, you know, like the sound of trumpets or the sound of a voice, right, that they might or might not recognize, right? Your unconscious is actually limitless, and it's connected to this vast collective unconscious, you know, and whether you believe in the divine or not, I don't actually care that much. What I want you to get, though, is that there's a world that can influence you and can be influenced. So now here's where I want you, like right at the half-hour point, is where I want you to step off of the side of the mountain with me. There's a character in the tarot called the Fool, and in most decks, he's just poised to step on off the mountain. And in my deck, he's in full fall, right? He's already stepped off the mountain and everything is just flying around him, right? But I want you to take the red pill with me here for a moment. Just just trust me that we're, I'll let you back on dry land in a moment. But I want you to remember when you were a baby. Now, you might not remember when you were a baby, but you can certainly remember seeing babies. You probably have seen one recently. And when you or that baby that we're talking about began to learn, right, you made distinctions, right? When you came into the world, you didn't know what anything was at all. Like the first distinction that you had to make was what was you and what wasn't you. Right? So I bite the blanket and it doesn't hurt, and I bite myself and it does hurt. So my hand must belong to me, right? It must be being me. And the blanket must be not me, right? And that learning continued, right? Not only did you get a concept of yourself, which you'd never had before, you got a concept of mother and father and milk and food and all the rest. And there's more that I'll say about this when we enter the second tier of our discussion. But here's the thing, what we did when we were little is to try and parse those 11 million bits of information coming into it every second. 11 million bits of information are coming in through your sensory system every second. And the conscious mind can only parse about 40 of them, right? And that's on a good day, right? The rest of it is invisible. So not only is there an invisible world through our collective unconscious, but there's an invisible world all around us. Because there's that other 10,999,060 bits of information that remain unprocessed. And the way that we learn to deal with that is like the 5 blind men and the elephant. We study this invisible world because everybody's got a little piece of the puzzle, right? The problem is that about 450 years ago, we decided to throw all that out, right? And we threw a big hunk of our humanity out with it because we wanted science to stand on its own, right? That science and aesthetics and ethics were all combined together, right? And there was this concept of the great chain of being, which I won't go into anymore here, but like, get it, that there is an invisible world that's not out there. It's right here alongside us. And we can retrain our minds to notice it, which is one of the things that makes the kind of wizardry I'm talking about possible. Does that make sense? Just enter into the chat window if you've got it. You've got a question about that. Something is missing, right? Something got left behind when they brought science over by itself. So I'm going to wrap up the topic of correspondences for now. Just realize that part of what you need to address these issues that we're talking about, which is like something else seems to be holding the keys. Life is dull, even though I'm doing the right things. I can't get past this block. I have everything and I'm not happy, right? Those issues can get dealt with when we engage the creativity of the collective unconscious through these powerful archetypes of the tarot. So we can solve seemingly unsolvable problems, right? And I want to talk to you about one of the most vexing problems of the 20th century, of the early 20th century. They had figured out how to send sound over wires, right? Alexander Graham Bell, first the telegraph, with these dots and dashes. And then suddenly Alexander Graham Bell, yes, Mr. Watson, I can hear you. Suddenly we were able to send a voice over the line. But what this farmer named Philo T. Farnsworth wanted to do, he was an amateur radio guy, he was trying to figure out how to send a picture over a wire, right? I.e., what we now know as television, right? It was an impossible problem to solve. Like the biggest minds of the generation were trying to solve that problem, and Philo T. Farnsworth was working his tail off trying to do it, and he kept having these dreams. And he would, in the dream, solve the problem. And then suddenly he would wake up, right? And the dream would be gone, and he couldn't remember it, right? It was so frustrating to him, right? He was unable to remember it. And then, because he was a farmer, right, he's out plowing the South 40. And he's tired, right? He's had a night of a bunch of these dreams, and he's exhausted, and he's the sun is beating down, he's hot, he can't think, right? Important, he can't think. And he's wiping the sweat off his brow, and he turns back to look at the field that he just plowed. And he gets it. There was one line. He plowed the field with one line. There was one tractor, back and forth and back and forth, and there was an image. The field was changed from an unplowed field to a plowed field, and this allowed him to realize that the way to put a picture over a wire is to do this back and forth thing, right? To draw a picture with a single line back and forth across, and of course Philo T. Farnsworth work, was actually the origin of the tube television, which then became the origin of the flat screen television, and all of our computer screens owe some debt of gratitude back to this farmer who dreamed and then finally sort of unthunk his idea because he was too tired to actually do any thinking. His unconscious was doing it, right? So I want to tell you a little bit about a second thing. I'm going to skip for now over language patterns, which is one of the most powerful wizard skills, is language patterns, right? And NLP uses a bunch of language patterns, and I really want to emphasize that unethical NLP people will use language patterns to get people to buy things from them that they don't need, right? I'm very anti people creating problems for people and then like getting people all in a twist about it and then offering the solution, right? I'm not about that. What I'm about is actually creating a movement of people practicing real magic that will change the world and save it, because magicians and wizards are people who cannot, once you understand your relationship with the natural world and the fact that you are one with it, we can't behave toward our environment the way that we have been. We can't behave toward each other the way that we have been. The way that magic can help our lives is that it will change us all from the inside, so that we don't become people who can do cheap magic tricks. We become people who are capable of doing great things. We're capable of becoming people who can do great things. So I'm going to temporarily move past language patterns. We'll come back to that in just a second. And I want you to notice what this is. This is a cave. And it may or may not be one of the caves in the valley region of France, where the Lascaux caves and other caves actually exist. From thousands of years ago, people were drawing these amazing drawings like this one on the sides of the caves. And what they noticed in these caves, and there's still some questions about what these were actually used for. It's pretty clear that there's probably some ritual aspect to this. And when we think about it, what does a ritual aspect mean? What does it mean to do a ritual. So let me just tell you what I think the ritual was that they were doing back then. They were throwing spears at this imaginary image of this bison, right? Right. So they were practicing their physical skills against this, right, in a ritualistic way. They'd create a model of the bison on the wall, and they were chucking their spears at it because, you know, your aim can get good that way. There was also something that they were doing on the mental plane, right, which was creating a positive model for what they wanted to do, right? So this was a ritual model. They wanted to kill a bison. They wanted to have their spear hit the bison. So they were creating a model for that to happen before the actual thing happened. Now, this is one of the great secrets of magic, is modeling, right? And of course, it's not a big secret because some of the researchers for NLP and other things in the modern world, you know, i.e. the late 20th century, when NLP was quote discovered, right, by looking at people who were effective in modeling what they were doing. So NLP itself is actually a model of something that works. So you create a model, and then you do the thing, and it creates neural pathways inside the brain that enable you to have a greater chance of success, right? And then there's a spiritual aspect, right? So I said I didn't care if you had any concept of the divine, but let's just say that spiritual means the invisible world, right? These, you know, 10 million or so bits of information that are coming into us every second constitute this world that we can actually deal with. How do we deal with it, right? We create, like they did, right? Imagine in your own life, and you can actually try this. If you have a problem that you want to solve, right? Let's just say that you want, you're in the middle of a divorce and you want an amicable divorce. You want things to go well, right? Then you might have two flowers or two branches that are coming off of a vine or a plant at your house. And what you do then is take the two and separate them and root them separately, and then grow plants that grow next to each other. You know, that's a very living ritual. You know, you also might create representative objects of yourself and the person that you want to divorce amicably from, and you might set them next to each other, you know, very close to each other, and then you might move them a few inches apart the next day, and you might move them a few inches apart the next day, and then you might actually put flowers or other objects next to them as they move apart, so that they're not just separate objects apart from each other, but they're developing this world. And so what you're doing is creating a world through a ritual of your own design, in which you are asking the invisible world to agree with your plan. You know, like you're creating this model or plan of the way that you want things to be. And if nothing else, it will create joy and pleasure for you as you work on it, and provide you a way to think about it that is powerful, right? So a ritual is a model, right? And when we talk about rituals and models, we can talk about the law of attraction. Now, I don't like to talk about the law of attraction all that much, because it's presented as something really super simple, and it kind of is. But what's not often understood about the law of attraction is, like, why does it work for some people and doesn't work for other people? And that's something that I can't go into here, but I promise you that we talk about that and practice that in the School for Wizards, and we will talk about that in an upcoming webinar. So even you don't have to come to the School for Wizards to learn this, but if you do want to come to the School for Wizards, it's a really inexpensive proposition to do that, because one of my dedications in the world, and my sort of, you know, my rich business friends who are serving high-end people are like, well, no, this is super valuable stuff. You have to charge a lot of money for this. And my thing is, well, no, I want to help a lot of people. So I want a lot of people to do this, but I'm not going to charge them very much for it. So let's go back to for a moment and say, all right, let's talk about some reasons why the law of attraction doesn't work. First of all, there are sometimes inside of us reversals where, you know, there's a very powerful part inside of us that says, no, I don't want that, right? You might be making your models and saying, yes, this is what I want. And there could be a part in there that's just like, no way, no how, you're not having that. And ironically, another thing that can often stop the law of attraction from happening is if you are constantly perseverating on it or thinking about it with your conscious mind. You know, part of doing a vision board is just to have it sort of disappear into the background so that you've handed off the task to your unconscious mind in the invisible world and said, look, let's let you handle this, right? So let me go back for a moment and talk about language, right? So the stack of books is representative of the way that language can create. And there are some theorists, and I'm not going to get overly intellectual on you, but there are some theorists who believe that things are created out of the word for them, right? Like the thing itself gets clarified, because remember, 11 million bits of information, right? We make these distinctions because we have words for them. And this is what we're teaching babies, right? You know, hand, ball, pencil, mommy, daddy, right? Like there are these ideas that start out with like nouns or things that you can point to and say, this is this. But think about how those exist if there's no language. My cat doesn't have a concept of this is the polished pine floor and this is the deck that has tile on it, right? The cat does not, I mean, who knows what's really in a cat's mind, but I postulate that the cat doesn't know or care that there are different floor finishes, right? The cat just, you know, is like, okay, am I comfortable? Am I hungry? And it sort of is being lived by the universe. So what this is about is how things are created around language. Things are created out of language. We create from what we think, right? And we think the way we think because we have language, right? It says in the book of Genesis, and I'm not a biblical scholar of any religion, but I have read a few hundred of those, you know, books that are commonly called holy books. And in part of Genesis, it says, in the beginning was the Word, right? In the beginning was the Word. Well, things are created out of formlessness from the Word. So this is why speaking your word is so powerful. Speaking the truth is so powerful. Speaking what you want is so powerful. And yeah. So there are many, many models of magic. And I'm going to go through a few of them here because this is where a wizard's power comes from, right? And I want you to know that like this practical piece that I shared with you about like creating your own ritual. If you want to separate from someone, just choose objects that represent you and amicably separate those objects in your life. You know, come up with a representation of it. And here's my challenge to you is between now and next week's webinar, actually come up with something that you want and then create a model for it. Right? Create a model for it and then deal with the model and just notice what happens in your life. Sometimes what we want is a physical thing, and it's certainly beneficial to model that. You know, like sometimes it's like, okay, I want this much money. But the truth is, most people don't really want money. They want that money to get something, right? And if you don't have any idea about what the money is going to do for you or going to get for you, then I would say focus on the other thing, and the money will come to provide it. Some of us in the world are just focused on money, and we just love money, and we love folding it and smelling it and touching it and stacking it. And, you know, it's just like, oh, it's such fun to play in money. And for those people, yeah, it's the money. Think about the money. But for most of us, it's something else, right? The changed world is the thing that motivates me in this world of creation, right? The changed world, like our conscious minds have limits and our unconscious minds don't. And the way that wizards create things is through manipulating the invisible world through both our conscious and unconscious minds, because rituals, spells, and the thing is, you've got to get over the language of this, right? So you say spells and people are like, "Ooh, that's evil witchcraft," right? Or whatever. People have notions about this. But if you say, oh, language patterns, language patterns, and then they go, oh yeah, that's that stuff. I know about language patterns. That's cool. So in the School for Wizards, we teach language patterns. We teach models of ritual. And let me just say some other things that other ways of making models, right? We talked about the cave people models. There's also models, historically, talismans and what are called voodoo dolls, right? And those are things that people get all like freaked out about, right? But what if you created a doll that was a healing doll, right? It's not a doll where you poke pens into to hurt someone. It's like a doll that creates something that you want. And I'll tell you, I did this myself as part of an exercise in a workshop that I did. I was like, okay, I'm going to make a love wizard. So I took this tiny little doll thing, and it was such a cute, crafty thing to do, right? And we didn't have any sewing gear, so I had to fasten this little costume out of paper, safety pins and cloth. But I created a little robe and a little long hair for the wizard, and a little wizard's hat, and these little beads around his waist that said love. And that was about 2 years ago. And since then, the School for Wizards has been born with me as the headmaster in the center of it, right? So you could say that was a voodoo doll, or you could say that was like a good magic doll, right? I made a model for that, and in some ways I didn't even realize I was making that model, but I did. There are other models, which are things that there's a woman in Oakland, California named Louisa Tesh, who wrote a book called Jambalaya, which often got confused as being a cookbook. She made models of household magic, and this is like sprinkling, sawdust at your entrances and exits of your house to clear the spirits that, the evil spirits that come in, sprinkling marble dust at the entrance to keep out energies that don't need to be in your house. Whether these things are actually affecting the invisible world or affecting the internal world, and therefore the collective unconscious that everyone is connected to, it doesn't actually matter, right? What you want to do is actually, when you begin to practice any kind of magic, notice if it works or not. And you also want to notice if the effects of the magic are creating powerful, positive good in your life. One of the things that a wizard always asks is this action for the greatest good of all, right? And the wizard includes herself in the all, or himself in the all. And if it's not for the greatest good of all, then it doesn't get done. It doesn't get that action doesn't happen, right? So I want to take the last 6 or so minutes to let you know that we are actually having the only live 3-day event for the School for Wizards in Sausalito, California on November 13th through the 15th. And this is an opportunity to study correspondences through the tarot deck. I'll have a facsimile copy of the new tarot deck I've just finished. We'll learn about the correspondences, and more importantly, we'll actually use them to find out important things about our lives and help address these issues that we've been talking about all hour. We will specifically learn language patterns, and we'll learn how to do that. And we'll actually learn a very clever technique to predict or actually create a choice in someone who will be none the wiser for it, right? It's called the magician's choice. And we teach it not because we want you to trick people, but because we want you to see how easy it is to create rapport and the importance of studying this kind of thing. And we also will make ritual models. The whole weekend will be involved with that. So it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the 13th through the 15th. Really, if you've got plans to do something else, I guarantee you that your life will change. And the people that have done this have all been, filled with superlatives about this. We've talked a little bit about correspondences. We do a lot more with correspondences with the deck. You get to live with a card all weekend and learn from it. We learn language patterns. We also make models both in the natural world and in the human-made world in order to create things that we want. So the way to do this, if you're at all curious, you can go to theschoolforwizards.com/magic101, theschoolforwizards.com. That's FOR Wizards, schoolforwizards.com/magic101. And for you on this call, there is still a discount, because it will say, if you decide to come, it will say that the cost is $9.97, and this includes 4 meals, and with a little additional extra cost, you can stay overnight. We'll have a camp out at the beautiful retreat center that we'll be at, and it would be so amazing to see you there, to learn more and more about this, and to be able to really be in balance with the world, right? The only thing that is in a continuous pattern of growth in the natural world, right? There's an ecological balance to everything, and the only thing that does not have that ecological balance is cancer. And we treat our businesses frequently like we want them to constantly grow, and without very much thought about how they are ecologically fitting into our lives or into the greater world of business that we find ourselves in. So I really encourage you, if you want a life-changing experience, whatever you're doing 2 weeks from now can't be as important as this. Seriously. I would love to see you there. And if you're in the least bit curious, just go check it out. Check it out. Go to theschoolforwizards.com/magic101. And I would love to take questions, but I'm not sure that I can. Let me see if I can go back to the chat. So hold on just 1 second. I'm going to take us back to the chat and see if there are any questions that we have here. Okay, stopping my screen share. There we go. Here is the wizard right here. And I am looking for my chat window. Okay, no questions at this point in time. I will have a different topic for you next week. I'm so looking forward to speaking with you again next week. Please come on, be part of the Wizards community. You are a wizard, and if you think about it for a moment, you really actually get that you are. And I'm here to support you in bringing to life and bringing to light all of your wizard powers. So until next week, I love you. Sayonara. Bye-bye.